The morning sun cast long shadows across Research Station Kepler 442 as Dr. Hyunwoo Kim prepared for another routine survey mission. He had been the lead xenobiologist on this frontier outpost for 3 years now. Every day brought new discoveries about the alien ecosystem they were studying. Today felt no different from any other day. Ji-Hai Park checked her equipment one final time. She was still new to the research team, having arrived only 6 months ago fresh from the academy. Her enthusiasm sometimes annoyed the older researchers, but she could not help being excited about every small discovery. This planet held so many secrets waiting to be uncovered. Captain Dongmin Lee reviewed the mission parameters with his usual military precision. The security of his people always came first. He trusted Hyunwoo's scientific judgment, but he never let his guard down. Unknown planets held too many dangers to be careless. The team set out in their exploration vehicle just after sunrise. The landscape around them looked peaceful enough. Purple grass swayed in the gentle breeze. Strange blue trees stretched toward the pale green sky. Everything seemed calm and ordinary for this alien world. They had traveled about 20 kilometers from the station when Ji-Hai spotted something unusual through her binoculars. She called for the vehicle to stop and pointed toward a rocky outcropping near a small stream. "There's something moving over there," she said, her voice filled with curiosity rather than alarm. Hyunwoo took the binoculars from her and focused on the area. At first he saw nothing. Then a shadow moved between the rocks. Something large was definitely there, but it was being very careful to stay hidden. "Probably just a grazer of some kind," Dongmin suggested. "We've cataloged dozens of herbivores in this region." But as they watched, the creature emerged briefly from behind the rocks. It was unlike anything they had seen before on this planet. The being stood nearly 2 meters tall on 6 powerful limbs. Its body was covered in dark, chitinous plates that gleamed in the sunlight. A long, flexible neck allowed its head to move, with surprising grace. "That's no herbivore," Hyunwoo whispered, adjusting his recording equipment to capture better images. The creature seemed to notice their vehicle. Instead of fleeing like most animals would, it stood perfectly still and appeared to be studying them in return. Its large eyes followed their movements with what looked like intelligence, but Hyunwoo knew better than to assign human traits to alien life forms. Ji-Hye was fascinated. She had never seen anything move with such controlled power. Even from this distance, she could tell the creature was incredibly strong, yet there was something almost graceful about the way it held itself, as if it was trying not to appear threatening. "We should get closer," she suggested eagerly. "Absolutely not," Dongmin replied immediately. "We don't know if it's territorial or aggressive. Standard protocol requires us to observe from a safe distance first." Hyunwoo agreed with the captain's caution, but he was also intensely curious about this new species. He had never seen anything quite like it in his years of xenobiology. The creature's body structure suggested it was a predator, but its behavior seemed oddly calm and measured. They spent the next 2 hours observing from their vehicle. The creature occasionally moved between different positions, but it never approached them or showed signs of aggression. Most interesting of all, it seemed to be watching them just as intently as they were watching it. "Look at how it moves its head," Ji-Hai pointed out. "It's tracking our movements. That suggests higher brain function than a simple predator would have." "Many predators are excellent at tracking prey," Hyunwoo replied, though privately he was beginning to wonder about this creature himself. Intelligence and hunting ability often go together in nature. The creature finally disappeared into the rocky terrain, moving with surprising stealth for something so large. The team marked the location on their maps and returned to the station to analyze their recordings. Back at the research station, Dr. So-Young Choi, the chief medical officer, reviewed the biological data they had collected. The scan showed a creature with a complex nervous system, but that alone did not prove intelligence. Many animals had sophisticated brains without being truly sentient. Based on standard classification protocols, I'm categorizing this as a non-sentient predator, Hyunwoo announced during their evening briefing. Probably the apex predator in this region. We should be cautious about future surveys in that area. Ji-hai felt disappointed by this assessment. Something about the creature had seemed different to her. The way it had watched them suggested more than simple animal curiosity. But she was still junior on the team, and Hyunwoo had years more experience than she did. What if we're wrong about it being non-sentient? She asked quietly. The tests don't lie, Hyunwoo replied. It showed no signs of tool use, no evidence of complex social behavior, no attempts at communication. It's clearly a successful predator, but that doesn't make it intelligent in any meaningful sense. Dongmin was primarily concerned with safety issues. A large predator near their survey routes could pose a real threat to his people. He wanted to establish clear protocols for avoiding the creature in future missions. We'll call it a code yellow species, he decided. Potentially dangerous, to be avoided when possible. All survey teams need to be informed about its presence in that sector. That night, Ji-hai found herself unable to sleep. She kept thinking about the creature and the way it had observed them. There had been something almost thoughtful in its posture, something that suggested deeper awareness than anyone else seemed willing to acknowledge. She made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would request permission to conduct additional observations of the creature. Maybe if she spent more time studying its behavior, she could find evidence of the intelligence she suspected it possessed. The next morning brought news that would make her plan much more complicated. Long-range sensors had detected the creature, moving closer to the research station during the night. It had not approached the perimeter, but it was definitely in the area. It's showing territorial behavior, Dongmin concluded grimly. We need to consider relocation protocols if it keeps getting closer to our base. But Ji-hai had a different theory. Maybe the creature was not being territorial at all. Maybe it was simply curious about them just as they were curious about it. Maybe it was trying to understand these strange new visitors to its world. She decided to test her theory, even if it meant going against established protocols. Some discoveries, she believed, required taking carefully calculated risks. This creature might be more important than any of them realized. The stage was set for an encounter that would challenge everything they thought they knew about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of communication between species. 3 days had passed since the first encounter with the mysterious creature. Ji-hai had been thinking about it constantly, but official duties kept her busy with other research projects. She was analyzing soil samples in the laboratory when Taeho Shin, the station engineer, burst through the door with an excited expression. "You need to see this," Taeho said, holding up his tablet. The motion sensors picked up something interesting near the outer perimeter last night. Ji-hai looked at the recorded footage. The large creature they had discovered was moving carefully, around the edge of their compound. It stayed well outside the security fence, but it was clearly investigating their facility. Most surprising of all, it seemed to be studying their equipment rather than looking for food or shelter. "Look at this part," Taeho pointed to a section of the recording. It spent almost an hour watching the solar panel maintenance robots, just sitting there, observing how they worked. Ji-hai felt her heart race with excitement. This was exactly the kind of behavior she had suspected the creature might display. It was not acting like a simple predator at all. It was showing curiosity about technology and mechanical processes. "Have you shown this to Dr. Kim?" she asked. "Not yet. I wanted to get your opinion first. You were the one who thought there might be more to this creature than we initially believed." Ji-hai made a decision that went against station protocols. She had been saving her food rations, and now she knew what she wanted to do with the extras. That evening, she would try to make contact with the creature. After the dinner shift ended, Ji-hai slipped out of the station through the maintenance exit. She had informed no one of her plans. If Captain Lee knew what she was doing, he would stop her immediately. But she felt certain this was the right approach. She walked slowly toward the area where the sensors had detected the creature. In her backpack, she carried several packages of processed protein bars and some fresh fruit from the station's hydroponics garden. She hoped the creature would understand her peaceful intentions. The alien landscape looked different in the evening light. The purple grass seemed to glow softly, and strange night sounds echoed from the distant hills. Ji-hai had never been outside the compound alone after dark, but she felt strangely calm about it. She found a flat rock near where the creature had been observed and carefully placed the food items on it. Then she backed away about 20 meters and sat down to wait. She had no idea if the creature would appear, but she was determined to try this approach. For almost 2 hours, nothing happened. Jihai began to think her plan had failed completely. Then she heard a soft, rustling sound from the rocks ahead of her. The creature emerged slowly from its hiding place, moving with incredible care and precision. It approached the food cautiously, stopping frequently to look at her. She remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. This was the closest she had ever been to the alien being, and she could see details that had not been visible from the survey vehicle. The creature's eyes were larger and more expressive than she had realized. They seemed to study her face with an intelligence that made her wonder how they had ever classified this being as non-sentient. Its movements were deliberate and thoughtful, not driven by simple animal instinct. To her amazement, the creature did not immediately eat the food. Instead, it picked up one of the protein bars and examined it carefully. It seemed to be trying to understand what this strange object was and where it had come from. After several minutes of investigation, the creature took a small bite of the protein bar. Its reaction was immediate and positive. It finished the entire bar quickly and then moved on to examine the fruit. Again, it spent time investigating before eating, as if it wanted to understand each new food before consuming it. When it had finished eating, something unexpected happened. The creature picked up a smooth stone from the ground and placed it carefully where the food had been. Then it backed away and looked at Jihai directly, as if trying to communicate something important. To her, Jihai felt a chill of recognition. The creature was trying to trade with her. It had left a gift in exchange for the food she had provided. This was not simple animal behavior. This suggested complex thinking and an understanding of social exchange. She stood up slowly and approached the rock. The creature watched her carefully but did not retreat. Up close, she could see that the stone was not randomly chosen. It was perfectly smooth and had an unusual blue color that caught the moonlight beautifully. Someone or something had selected this stone with care. Jihai picked up the stone and held it up so the creature could see that she accepted the gift. She then placed her hand over her heart and bowed slightly, hoping to communicate gratitude in a way the creature might understand. The creature's reaction surprised her even more. It lifted one of its 6 limbs and placed it against what she assumed was its chest area. Then it lowered its head in what looked remarkably like a return bow. It was mimicking her gesture of respect and appreciation. For several minutes, they stood looking at each other across the small distance that separated them. Jihai felt as though she was participating in the first meaningful communication between their species. The creature seemed to feel the same way, remaining calm and focused on their interaction. Eventually, the creature began to back away toward its hiding place in the rocks. But it moved slowly, as if reluctant to end this encounter. It kept looking back at her, and Jihai had the distinct impression that it hoped to meet again. She returned to the station with her mind racing. The blue stone was safely tucked in her pocket, physical proof of what had happened. But she knew that convincing the others would not be easy. Dr. Kim was committed to his scientific classification system, and Captain Lee would be furious that she had violated safety protocols. The next morning brought another surprise. Yoonji Moon, the communications specialist, reported unusual readings from the long-range sensors. The creature had returned during the night and had spent several hours in the same area where Jihai had left the food. "It's establishing a routine," Taeho observed, looking at the sensor data. "This is definitely territorial marking behavior," but Jihai knew better. The creature was not marking territory. It was hoping for another meeting. It had understood that this was a place where peaceful contact between their species was possible. She began planning her next move. If she could establish regular contact with the creature, she might be able to gather evidence of its intelligence that even Dr. Kim could not dismiss. The blue stone in her pocket reminded her that first contact between species could happen in the most unexpected ways. That evening, she prepared another selection of food items. This time, she would be ready to observe more carefully and document whatever happened. She had a feeling that this creature was about to change everything they thought they knew about life on this planet. The real test would come when the others discovered what she was doing. But for now, she was content to know that somewhere in the alien landscape, an intelligent being was waiting to continue a conversation that had barely begun. Jihai had been secretly meeting with the creature for 2 weeks when everything changed. She had started calling it Nuru in her personal notes, which meant world in Korean. The name seemed fitting for a being that was opening up an entirely new world of understanding. During their evening meetings, Nuru had shown remarkable progress in learning about human behavior. It could now recognize different types of food and had even started bringing small gifts in return. Smooth stones, interesting plant specimens, and once, a piece of what looked like naturally formed crystal. But Jihai knew she could not keep these meetings secret forever. The sensor readings were becoming too obvious to ignore, and Captain Lee was asking pointed questions about the creature's regular appearances near the station. The decision was taken out of her hands when Dr. Kim announced that he wanted to conduct formal intelligence testing on the creature. Long-range observations had convinced him that it might be more than just a simple predator, though he remained skeptical about true sentience. "We need to approach this scientifically," Hyun-woo explained. During the morning briefing, "I've designed a series of tests that will determine once and for all whether this creature possesses genuine intelligence or is simply displaying advanced instinctive behaviors." Ji-Hae felt her stomach tighten with worry. She knew that Nuru was intelligent, but she also knew that the creature thought in ways that might not match human expectations. The standard test Dr. Kim planned to use had been designed for humanoid species with similar cognitive patterns. "What kind of tests?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Problem-solving exercises, pattern recognition, tool use assessment, and communication attempts," Hyun-woo replied. "We'll start with simple puzzles and work our way up to more complex challenges." Captain Lee was supportive of the testing plan, but he insisted on strict safety protocols. The creature would be studied from behind protective barriers, with armed guards standing by in case it became aggressive. "I don't want anyone taking unnecessary risks," Dongmin stated firmly. "This is still an unknown alien predator regardless of how intelligent it might be." The testing began 3 days later. Hyun-woo had constructed a series of puzzle boxes designed to test problem-solving abilities. Each box contained food that could only be accessed by manipulating a sequence of levers and switches in the correct order. Nuru approached the first test setup cautiously. Ji-Hae watched from the observation window, her heart pounding with anxiety. She wanted desperately for Nuru to succeed, but she could already see problems with the test design. The puzzle boxes required fine motor control suited to human hands. Nuru's limbs were much larger and less precise for this type of manipulation. After several minutes of attempting to work the small mechanisms, the creature gave up in apparent frustration. "Failure on test 1, Hyun-woo noted in his records. "Subject unable to solve basic mechanical puzzle." Ji-Hae wanted to object, but she knew it would reveal her secret meetings with Nuru. She watched in growing dismay as test after test failed to show Nuru's true capabilities. The pattern recognition tests used visual displays that assumed human color perception. Nuru examined the screens with interest but could not complete the sequences as designed. The tool use assessment provided implements, sized for human hands, which Nuru could barely grasp properly. "This is not working," Yoon Ji-moon observed during a break in the testing. "The creature seems interested in what we're doing, but it's not engaging with the tests the way we expected." "That's because the tests are inappropriate," Ji-Hee finally said, unable to remain silent any longer. "We're testing it like it's a human in an alien body, but it has its own way of thinking and interacting with the world." Hyun-woo looked at her with surprise. "Do you have evidence to support that theory?" Ji-Hae realized she was at a crossroads. She could continue hiding her secret meetings or she could risk everything to help Nuru. She chose to take the risk. "Yes, I do," she said quietly. "I've been meeting with Nuru every evening for the past 2 weeks." The silence that followed her admission was deafening. Captain Lee's face turned red with anger while Dr. Kim stared at her in shock. Only Tai-ho and Yoon-ji looked more curious than upset. "You've been what?" Dongmin demanded. Do you realize how dangerous and irresponsible that was? It wasn't dangerous, Jihai replied, pulling the blue stone and several other gifts from her pocket. Nuru has been trying to communicate with us from the beginning. It brings gifts, it shows respect, it even tried to mimic my gestures. She described her meetings in detail, explaining how Nuru had demonstrated patience, curiosity, and social understanding. The creature had learned to recognize her approach and had started bringing different types of gifts based on what seemed to interest her most. Look at this, she said, showing them a small piece of wood that had been carefully shaped into an almost perfect sphere. This isn't natural. Nuru made this using tools we've never seen. It has technology, just not the kind we recognize. Hyunwoo examined the wooden sphere with growing amazement. The surface was too smooth and regular to be natural, but there were no tool marks that matched any human implements. Even if this is true, Captain Lee said, though his anger was giving way to curiosity, you violated direct orders and put yourself in serious danger. The only danger was in our assumptions, Jihai replied. Nuru has had dozens of opportunities to hurt me, but instead it's been trying to build a relationship between our species. That evening, against Captain Lee's better judgment, the entire team observed one of Jihai's meetings with Nuru. They watched from concealed positions as the creature approached with its usual careful movements. When Nuru saw that Jihai was not alone, it stopped and studied the area for several minutes. Then, in a gesture that amazed everyone, it began to approach more slowly and placed not one gift but several small items near the meeting place. It knows we're here, Taeho whispered. It's trying to communicate with all of us. The most remarkable moment came when Nuru looked directly at each of their hiding places in turn. It had detected all of them despite their careful concealment. Then it performed what could only be described as a formal greeting, bowing its head toward each position where humans were hidden. My God, Hyunwoo breathed. It's been letting us think we were observing it secretly. It knew where we were all along. Dr. So-young Choi, who had remained skeptical throughout the debates, was the first to step out from concealment. Nuru watched her approach but showed no signs of alarm or aggression. Hello, Nuru, she said simply. The creature's response changed everything they thought they knew about alien intelligence. It lifted one limb in what was clearly an attempt at a human wave, then made a sound that was obviously trying to mimic human speech patterns. It's been learning our language, Yoonji said in wonder. All this time it's been studying us just as much as we've been studying it. That night, Hyunwoo formally revised his classification of Nuru from non-sentient predator to intelligence unknown. It was the first step toward recognizing that they had encountered not just an alien animal, but an alien person. The real question now was what would happen when corporate headquarters learned about this discovery, and whether humanity was ready to accept that intelligence could take forms they had never imagined. The weeks following Nuru's formal recognition as an intelligent being brought remarkable changes to Research Station Kepler 442. Jihai had been officially assigned as the primary contact specialist, spending several hours each day in structured communication sessions with the creature. What amazed everyone most was how quickly Nuru adapted to new forms of interaction. Within days of the team's first group meeting, the creature had learned to distinguish between different humans by their voices and movements. It seemed to understand that each person had a unique identity and role within their group. Taeho discovered that Nuru was fascinated by mechanical devices. The creature would watch for hours as he performed maintenance on station equipment. More surprisingly, Nuru began bringing objects from its own environment that served similar functions to human tools. Look at this. Taeho showed the team a curved piece of what looked like bone that Nuru had presented to him. It's been shaped specifically for digging. The creature has been making tools all along, we just didn't recognize them as technology. Dr. Kim was documenting everything with scientific precision, but even he was amazed by the complexity of Nuru's behaviors. The creature demonstrated memory spanning weeks, planning abilities that extended into the future, and problem-solving, skills that often surpassed human solutions. It thinks in 3 dimensions better than we do, Hyun-woo noted after watching Nuru create a shelter using an engineering approach no human had considered. Its brain is structured differently, but that doesn't make it less intelligent. Ji-hee spent the most time with Nuru and began to understand the creature's emotional range. When storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Nuru would become restless and protective, positioning itself between the weather and the humans. When the team celebrated successful experiments, Nuru seemed to sense their positive emotions and would bring extra gifts. The relationship deepened when Ji-hee became ill with a fever that kept her confined to the medical bay for several days. Dr. Choi had diagnosed it as a reaction to local pollen, nothing serious but requiring rest and treatment. On the second day of her illness, sensors detected Nuru approaching the station perimeter. This was unusual behavior, as the creature normally only came for scheduled meetings. Yoonji went out to investigate and found Nuru waiting patiently near the main entrance. The creature had brought something different this time. Instead of the usual smooth stones or shaped wood, it carried a bundle of unfamiliar plants. When Yoonji approached, Nuru carefully placed the plants on the ground and then sat down to wait. "It won't leave," Yoonji reported back to the team. "It's just sitting there by the entrance like it's waiting for something." Dr. Choi examined the plants that Nuru had brought. Her analysis revealed compounds with anti-inflammatory properties that could help reduce Ji-hee's fever. The creature had somehow understood that she was sick and had brought medicine. How could it possibly know what these plants would do for human biology? So Young wondered aloud. We're completely different species. The answer became clear when they allowed Nuru to approach the medical bay window. The creature looked directly at Ji-hee through the transparent barrier, and its distress was obvious to everyone present. Nuru understood that she was suffering, and it wanted to help. Ji-hee was moved to tears by this demonstration of caring. She pressed her hand against the window, and Nuru gently placed one of its limbs against the glass from the other side. The gesture was unmistakably one of comfort and friendship. "It's not just intelligent," she whispered. "It has emotions. It cares about what happens to us." From that moment, the relationship between the research team and Nuru took on a completely different character. This was no longer just scientific study of an alien species. It was the beginning of genuine friendship between beings from different worlds. Nuru refused to leave the station perimeter until Ji-hee recovered. For 3 days, it maintained a patient vigil, accepting food from the team members but never wandering far from the medical building. When Ji-hee finally emerged healthy and energetic again, Nuru's joy was unmistakable. The creature performed what could only be described as a celebration dance, moving in complex patterns while making melodious sounds that seemed to express happiness. The entire team gathered to watch this display of alien emotion, and several people found themselves smiling and laughing along with Nuru's obvious delight. We need to learn more about its social structure, Hyun-woo decided. If Nuru shows this much emotional complexity, what about others of its species? This led to Nuru's most remarkable revelation yet. The creature began leading Ji-hee on longer walks away from the station, always staying within communication range but exploring areas they had never visited together. On one of these walks, Nuru brought her to a hidden valley where other creatures like itself could be observed in the distance. Ji-hee counted at least a dozen individuals, all engaged in what appeared to be complex social interactions. Through careful observation, she realized that Nuru's species had a sophisticated society. They used tools, built structures, and appeared to communicate through combinations of sound, gesture, and bioluminescent patterns on their chitinous shells. They're not just intelligent individuals, she reported back to the team. They have an entire civilization. Nuru has been serving as our ambassador this whole time. The most amazing discovery came when Nuru began creating what could only be called art. Using colored stones, pieces of metal, and plant materials, the creature constructed elaborate patterns near the meeting area. These weren't random arrangements, but carefully planned compositions that seemed to tell stories or convey complex ideas. Look at this pattern. Ji-hee showed the team photographs of Nuru's latest creation. See how it uses color and shape to represent the station, then shows a pathway connecting to representations of Nuru's people. It's trying to show us something about building bridges between our species. Taiho was particularly impressed by the mathematical precision of Nuru's artistic arrangements. The creature used geometric relationships and proportional spacing that demonstrated advanced understanding of complex mathematical concepts. This isn't just pretty decoration, he explained to the others. This is sophisticated mathematical art. Nuru understands principles of engineering and design that took human civilization thousands of years to develop. Captain Lee, who had been the most cautious about accepting Nuru as truly intelligent, finally admitted that his initial concerns had been misguided. I was wrong to think of it as just an animal, he said during one of their evening briefings. Nuru is a person, just a very different kind of person than we're used to meeting. The station's relationship with Nuru had evolved from wary observation to genuine friendship. The creature had become a regular part of their daily routine, participating in activities and contributing to their understanding of the planet in ways no human could have managed alone. But this peaceful period of discovery and friendship was about to face its greatest test. Long-range communication had detected incoming ships from corporate headquarters, and the messages indicated that executives were very interested in the station's reports about intelligent alien life. Ji-Hai felt a growing sense of unease about what corporate involvement might mean for Nuru and its people. Some discoveries, she was beginning to realize, might be too important and too dangerous to share with those who only saw profit and advantage. The bond between human and alien had grown strong, but it was about to be tested by forces that neither species had expected to face. The corporate ships arrived on a cold morning when storm clouds hung low over research station Kepler 442. Colonel Byung-Soo Kang emerged from the lead transport with military precision, followed by Dr. Woo Jin-Yu, whose expensive clothes and calculating eyes immediately put the research team on edge. Ji-Hai watched from the observation deck as more personnel unloaded equipment and supplies. Something about their arrival felt wrong. These people had not come to study or learn. They had come to take control. I want a complete briefing on this alien intelligence situation within the hour, Colonel Kang announced as soon as he entered the station. Corporate headquarters is very interested in the potential applications of your discoveries. Dr. Yu was more direct in his approach. He immediately began asking questions about Nuru's capabilities, its technology, and whether the creature could be convinced to share knowledge about its species' advanced engineering techniques. From your reports, this being appears to have access to mathematical and construction principles that could be extremely valuable, Wu Jin explained to the assembled team. We need to determine the best methods for extracting this information. The word extracting made Ji-Hai's blood run cold. She exchanged worried glances with the rest of her team. None of them had considered Nuru as something to be exploited for profit. Nuru is not a resource to be extracted from, she said carefully. It's an intelligent being with its own rights and interests. We've been building a relationship based on mutual respect. Colonel Kang looked at her with the expression of someone who had no patience for idealistic thinking. Miss Park, this creature represents a potential military advantage that could change the balance of power across multiple star systems. Individual feelings cannot be allowed to interfere with strategic interests. Over the next few days, the corporate team implemented new protocols that made the research staff deeply uncomfortable. They wanted to study Nuru under controlled laboratory conditions, using methods that were more like interrogation than scientific observation. Absolutely not, Captain Lee stated firmly when presented with their plans. My people have spent months building trust with this creature. I won't allow you to destroy that relationship with aggressive tactics. But corporate authority overruled local command decisions. Colonel Kang had orders from the highest levels, and Dr. Yu had contracts that gave him extensive rights to study any discoveries made at the research station. The confrontation came when they attempted to capture Nuru for transport to a secure facility. The creature had arrived for its regular evening meeting with Ji-Hai, carrying what appeared to be a new artistic creation made from crystalline materials. Instead of the peaceful meeting Nuru expected, it found armed soldiers surrounding the area with containment equipment. The creature's immediate reaction was confusion rather than aggression. It looked around at the weapons and barriers, then directly at Jihi as if asking for an explanation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears running down her face. "I tried to stop them." The capture attempt failed because Nuru was far more agile than the corporate team had anticipated. The creature evaded their nets and containment fields with fluid grace, disappearing into the rocky terrain before they could corner it. "It will be back," Colonel Kang said confidently. "These animals always return to established feeding areas." "Nuru is not an animal," Jihi replied angrily, "and it's probably never going to trust us again after this betrayal." She was wrong about Nuru's trust, but right about everything else being changed forever. 2 days after the failed capture attempt, long-range sensors detected unusual activity in the valley where Nuru's people lived. Multiple individuals were moving toward the research station in what appeared to be an organized approach. "They're coming to investigate what happened to their ambassador," Hyunwoo realized. "Nuru must have told them about our attempt to capture it." The situation became critical when a survey team led by Dr. Yu encountered one of the approaching creatures and attempted another capture. This time, the alien being was not alone, and it was not willing to retreat peacefully. The corporate team found themselves facing multiple intelligent creatures who were clearly coordinating their movements and tactics. What had been planned as a simple specimen collection became a dangerous confrontation with beings who were defending their territory and their people. During the chaos of this encounter, Jihi made a decision that would put her own life at risk. She knew that only direct communication with Nuru could prevent this situation from escalating into something much worse. She slipped away from the station without authorization and headed toward the area where the confrontation was taking place. Her plan was to find Nuru and try to explain what had really happened, hoping that their friendship could overcome the damage done by corporate interference. What she found instead was a disaster waiting to happen. Dr. Yu's team had cornered 2 of Nuru's people in a narrow canyon and were preparing to use force to subdue them. The creatures were clearly frightened and defensive, but they were also showing signs of preparing to fight back. Jihi tried to position herself between the 2 groups, hoping to diffuse the tension through communication. But as she climbed over a loose pile of rocks to reach a better position, the ground gave way beneath her feet. The rock slide that followed was sudden and devastating. Tons of stone and debris came crashing down, trapping Jihi beneath heavy boulders and cutting her off from both human and alien rescue teams. Pain shot through her body as rocks settled around her. She could feel warm blood where sharp edges had cut through her clothing, and her left leg was pinned beneath a boulder too heavy for her to move alone. The worst part was not the physical injury, but the realization that her attempt to help had probably made everything worse. Now both sides would blame the other for what had happened to her, and the fragile possibility of peace between their species might be destroyed forever. She could hear voices calling her name from somewhere above the debris, but they sounded very far away. Her radio had been damaged in the fall, and she had no way to signal her exact location to the rescue teams. As darkness began to close in around the edges of her vision, Jihi heard a different sound. Something large was moving through the rocks above her, displacing stones with careful precision. She looked up to see a familiar silhouette against the alien sky. Nuru had found her. The creature moved with incredible care, testing each step to avoid causing another rock slide. When it reached her position, Nuru immediately began working to clear smaller rocks from around her body. But this was not a rescue that Nuru could accomplish alone. The boulder pinning her leg was too heavy even for the creature's considerable strength, and Jihi could feel herself growing weaker from blood loss and shock. The critical moment came when human voices approached from one direction, and the sounds of other alien creatures came from another. Both rescue teams were converging on the same location, and both were armed and frightened. Nuru faced a choice that would define the future of relations between their species. It could flee to safety and avoid the approaching confrontation, or it could stay and try to protect Jihi regardless of the personal risk. The creature's decision came without hesitation. Nuru positioned itself over Jihi's trapped form, spreading its 6 limbs to provide maximum protection from falling debris. Then it began making loud, rhythmic calls that carried across the canyon. The calls were not random sounds, but a complex, pattern that seemed designed to communicate specific information. Jihai realized that Nuru was calling for help, not just from its own people but from the humans as well. When both rescue teams arrived at the scene, they found something none of them had expected. Nuru was using its own body as a living shield to protect the injured human, while simultaneously coordinating rescue efforts through a combination of gestures and vocalizations that both species could understand. "It's trying to show us where she's trapped," Teho called out, interpreting Nuru's careful movements. "And it's keeping the unstable rocks from shifting." The rescue took 4 hours of careful work, with humans and aliens coordinating their efforts under Nuru's patient guidance. The creature never left its protective position over Jihai, even when falling stones struck its own body. When Jihai was finally freed and transported to medical care, Nuru accompanied the rescue team back to the station. The creature's loyalty and courage in risking its own life to save a human had been witnessed by everyone present. Colonel Kang and Dr. Yu found their aggressive plans completely undermined by what had happened. The corporate personnel who had witnessed the rescue were asking pointed questions about the ethics of treating such obviously intelligent and caring beings as military resources to be exploited. As Jihai recovered in the medical bay, Nuru maintained another patient vigil outside the station. This time, however, it was not alone. Others of its species had come to wait with their ambassador, showing that the bond between human and alien had grown beyond individual friendship. The crisis had revealed the true character of both species, and the choice between exploitation and cooperation would determine everything that happened next. Jihai woke up in the medical bay 3 days after the rock slide with her leg in a stabilization brace and bandages covering numerous cuts and bruises. The first thing she saw was Dr. Choi checking her vital signs with obvious relief. "Welcome back," So Young said with a warm smile. "You gave everyone quite a scare." "Nuru," Jihi said immediately, trying to sit up despite the protests from her injured body. "Is Nuru safe? What happened after the rescue?" "See for yourself," So Young replied, helping her turn toward the window. Outside, Jihai could see Nuru sitting patiently near the station entrance, just as it had during her previous illness. But this time, the creature was not alone. 5 other beings of its species had joined the vigil, creating what looked like a formal gathering of representatives. "They've been there since the rescue," So Young explained. "Captain Lee has been trying to establish communication protocols, but they seemed to be waiting specifically for you to recover." The political situation had changed dramatically during Jihai's unconsciousness. The corporate personnel who had witnessed Nuru's heroic actions during the rescue were asking serious questions about the ethics of the exploitation plans. "Colonel, Kang is facing a revolt among his own people," Captain Lee explained when he visited the medical bay later that day. "Half of his team is refusing to participate in any aggressive actions against Nuru's species." Dr. Yu was dealing with even more serious problems. Video recordings of the rescue had been transmitted back to corporate headquarters, and executives were suddenly very concerned about public relations issues. "The board is asking difficult questions about our methods," Wu Jin admitted during a tense meeting with the research team. Images of an alien creature risking its life to save a human scientist could become very problematic if they reached the media. Hyunwoo had spent the 3 days documenting everything that had happened, building a comprehensive case for recognizing Nuru's species as fully intelligent beings with rights that must be respected. "The evidence is overwhelming," he reported, to both the research team and the corporate representatives. "These beings demonstrate advanced intelligence, complex social structures, sophisticated technology, artistic expression, and most importantly, moral reasoning and empathy. They showed more ethics in one afternoon than we've shown in weeks," Teho added pointedly, looking directly at the corporate officials. The turning point came when Jihai was finally strong enough to participate in a formal meeting between the two species. She walked slowly to the station entrance, supported by crutches but determined to continue the work that had nearly cost her life. Nuru's reaction to seeing her upright and mobile was immediate and joyful. The creature approached, carefully, clearly aware of her injuries, and gently touched her hand with one of its limbs in a gesture of greeting and concern. Hello, old friend, Jihai said softly. Thank you for saving my life. What happened next amazed everyone present. Nuru began making complex vocalizations while gesturing toward its companions. The other creatures responded with their own sounds and movements, creating what was clearly a structured conversation. They're discussing something, Yunji observed, her communications training helping her recognize the patterns in the alien exchange. This looks like a formal consultation or decision-making process. After several minutes of discussion, one of the new creatures approached the group of humans. It was slightly smaller than Nuru, but moved with the same careful intelligence. In its limbs, it carried a bundle of objects that it placed carefully on the ground. The gift bundle contained items that took everyone's breath away. Pieces of metal worked into complex geometric shapes, crystals arranged in mathematical patterns, and what appeared to be written symbols carved into smooth stone tablets. It's a library, Hyunwoo whispered in amazement. They're sharing their knowledge with us. Nuru made sounds that seemed to be providing explanations for each item, occasionally looking at Jihai as if to confirm that she understood the significance of what was being offered. The smallest item in the bundle was a smooth disc made from an unfamiliar material that seemed to glow with its own inner light. When Jihai picked it up, the disc responded to her touch by projecting complex patterns of light into the air above it. Holographic technology, Taeho breathed, but based on principles we've never seen before. Colonel Kang and Dr. Yu watched these demonstrations with expressions of growing amazement and concern. The technology being freely shared represented advances that could transform human civilization, but it was being offered as a gift between friends rather than something to be seized by force. They're choosing to share this with us, Jihai realized, but only because they trust us to use it responsibly. The formal recognition of Nuru's species as intelligent beings came that evening, signed by Captain Lee as the ranking military officer and witnessed by the entire research team. Dr. Yu reluctantly added his signature representing corporate interests, though his plans for exploitation had been completely abandoned. I hereby recognize the beings native to this planet as fully sentient persons with all rights and protections accorded to intelligent species under interstellar law, Dongmin read from the official document. Nuru and its companions responded to this ceremony with what appeared to be their own formal ritual. The creatures arranged themselves in a complex pattern and began producing harmonized sounds, while their chitinous shells displayed shifting patterns of bioluminescent light. They're accepting us as friends, Jihi translated, understanding, coming from months of careful observation. This is their way of saying that our species can work together. The weeks that followed brought remarkable developments. Jihai was officially appointed as the station's first interspecies liaison specialist, responsible for developing communication protocols and cultural exchange programs. Nuru took on the role of ambassador for its people, spending several hours each day at the research station and helping to bridge the gap between human and alien understanding. The creature learned basic human sign language with remarkable speed and even began attempting spoken words. Free end. Nuru managed to vocalize during one of their communication sessions, the sound rough but unmistakably human speech. Yes, Jihai replied, tears of joy running down her face. Friend, the research station was transformed from a simple scientific outpost into a center for peaceful interspecies contact. Dr. Kim published groundbreaking papers on alternative forms of intelligence that revolutionized xenobiology throughout human space. Captain Lee found himself overseeing the construction of expanded facilities designed to accommodate both human and alien representatives. The military protocols that had once focused on defense against unknown threats were replaced by procedures for protecting and facilitating peaceful cooperation. Even Colonel Kang adapted to the new reality, becoming an advocate for responsible, first contact protocols throughout the military command structure. His reports emphasized that intelligence could take forms that human thinking had never anticipated. We almost made a terrible mistake, he admitted to Jihai during one of his final days at the station. If we had succeeded in capturing and exploiting these beings, we would have destroyed something precious and irreplaceable. Dr. Yu returned to corporate headquarters with a completely different mission than he had originally planned. Instead of reporting on resources to be exploited, he advocated for investment in peaceful technology exchange and cultural cooperation programs. The potential for mutual benefit is enormous, he explained to the corporate board, but it can only be realized through respect and partnership, not domination. The technology shared by Nauru's people led to advances in engineering, medicine, and communication that benefited both species. But more importantly, the relationship itself became a model for how different forms of life could work together across the boundaries of species and culture. Jihaye often sat in the evening watching Nauru create new artistic arrangements near the station. The patterns had evolved to incorporate both human and alien elements, symbols of the growing understanding between their peoples. "What do you think comes next?" she asked Nauru during one of these peaceful moments. The creature's response was a complex arrangement of sounds and gestures that she had learned to interpret as meaning hope, growth, and shared futures. As the alien sun set over Research Station, Kepler 442, casting strange and beautiful colors across the landscape, Jihai reflected on how much had changed since that first day when they had dismissed Nauru as just another beast. The truth was much more wonderful and complex than any of them had imagined. Intelligence took many forms. Friendship could cross any boundary, and sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from taking but from giving. Nauru had taught them all that loyalty and courage were not unique to humanity. These qualities could be found wherever consciousness chose to embrace them, regardless of the physical form that consciousness inhabited. The bond between human and alien had become something larger than friendship. It had become proof that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered by those wise enough to approach them with open minds and open hearts. In the distance, other members of Nauru's species could be seen working alongside human researchers, sharing knowledge and building something entirely new together. The age-old